This has been absolutely amazing. Thank you in particular to those of you that have been with us from the start. We've got people on the dinosaurs, people all over the place. There's people in the distance. It's been an absolutely amazing event, and right from the very, very beginning of the planning stage for this whole thing, I had one idea in mind to close the thing out, and that was to get these guys along if they would have me, to get them to come along and share some of their wisdom with you and share some of the magic that captured in their podcast. If you haven't been listening to the VR podcast, you've got to hit iTunes once you leave this session and go and start subscribing to the VR podcast, because it's absolutely superb. The chemistry between the three gents to my left and Amanda, who's not with us today, is just brilliant. So I'm going to hand over to these guys. They're going to see us through to the end, and we're going to close things out with a little IFX mayhem at the very end to round things off. But I'm going to hand over to Alex, to Stephen, and to James.
All right,
Man, that was really nice, Steve. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, guys.
I got to say, I just want to thank you, Steve, for being one of the first people that introduced me to virtual reality as well. And I think you're walked me the vibe for the first time, and so I appreciate that. And also, thank you to James and Stephen, and a person who's not here. Really quickly, maybe James or Steve, you want to tell a little bit about the story of the virtual reality podcast and how we came to do.
Yeah, I'll do it. So about, I would say maybe a year and a half ago, Alex came in and he started the chat, hashtag VRDU chat. And he will admit it was slow going. Anybody that's ever started the Twitter chat knows that it's difficult to maintain a chat. And one of those people was in there was Stephen, and then I would come on a little bit myself. And about, I don't know, what was you, about 6 months ago, Alex? Something like that?
December, January?
Yeah, somewhere around there. Alex and Stephen had this brainchild for a podcast, and they invited me on, and I was actually working on some podcast stuff for some companies at the time, and I thought, sure. And Stephen and Alex both had the idea to pull Amanda in. And at that point, none of us had really met in real life. I think that the person that I had the closest relationship with was Stephen, and it was just through some DMs every now and then. But little would we know that like every week for hours on end, we would be interacting for a good while on this podcast. And you can hear it when you go back and listen. Episode 1 is not as fluid as I would say episode 12 is, the season finale. Yeah. But you can really tell that we really like what we do, and we kind of bring different backgrounds to the forefront. Mine is as a social studies educator into technology, and I just kind of fell into immersion tech several years ago, and I just kind of fell in love with it. But we all kind of have this different background, and we have these different experiences. And we also have some personalities that really help us in a podcast. And so we did just finish up season 1. It seemed like a really good time to have a season finale. So that was 12 right before ISTE, the Educational Technology Conference that was in Chicago just last week. And so that was actually also the first time that we met in real life.
All of us in person.
Yeah,
that was really fun. We lunch on Sunday. We all met together, and some of us had met before, but it was really cool because we use this technology, right? And we're doing podcasts now. The eventual goal is to be doing our vodcast, whatever you want to call them, in VR in something like this. But technology like this, or like the telephone, or like VR, is how we were able to connect. So we started on Twitter. Start on the podcast, we start on Google Hangouts, and we take all of our knowledge collectively. I sit at a K-12 independent school as a tech director, but like James, for the last 2 or 3 years, I've spent just all of my time researching, going to all the VR Scout events, going to Vision, trying to connect myself with industry to figure out how we can bring this immersive technology to education, because it is so powerful, right? Just following Balinson and using VR for, again, the impossible, dangerous, rare, expensive, or counterproductive, if we can bring that to students where it fits their paradigm, that's my goal, is to bring those experiences to students who fit to experiences that fit into those categories for students who can't get there. This platform has been one that has allowed us to interact with companies, also share our knowledge, and learn from others as we bring guests on as well. And it's just been wildly fun.
Very fun, yes.
Yeah. It's been a great experience, and I just encourage you, if you haven't listened to the podcast, check it out and realize that we've never met in person through the whole first season. We didn't until after the first season concluded, and I think that's pretty amazing. And I think that's also a testament to digital technologies. You can bring people together, and you can form relationships, and you can build a project totally virtually. And so now be invited by Steve to come here today to be able to talk a little bit. We're going to talk about today. We're coming off this big conference that just happened in Chicago. And what we want to talk about today is just some of the broad trends that we're seeing, some of the things that we saw from the conference, and coming off of what Charlie was just saying in the last session. I think this will be a great way to wrap it up here. Who wants to go first? James, Steven? What do you guys want to talk about here?
I know everybody wants to say this, maybe perhaps. First of all, if the raise of hands, was anybody at ISC this year in Chicago? Oh, yeah, hello.
A few people. There we go. Okay.
All right.
Hey,
so what was great was you walked up the stairs to the main hall, and everybody saw this, but plastered on the stairs was a banner, right? And that banner said "Immersive Learning Ahead," and with a logo of an avatar with a head. So sort of, this is what everybody saw, that, and we knew what one of the hot topics was going to be at this year's conference was 24,000 educators. So that's, from an ed standpoint, really exciting to see that conferences like ISD, Q, FETC, TCA are focusing on immersive tech. That blew my mind that they had that there.
Yeah, and what that shows. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, and it's interesting what a year brings, because while we are really passionate about immersive technology, and we're also passionate about education, and we saw the potential, that I would say that was not the consensus among the education community. And ISTE actually didn't go all into immersive tech until educators and vendors were working together to come up with these great products. And so what we really saw at this event were a lot of sessions on AR and VR creation. Like, that was the biggest thing, was creation. And we saw these companies that were doing the same exact things. And I think two of our favorites, I guess I'm speaking for everybody. I don't mean to speak for everybody, but I think two of our favorite companies.
That's okay, though.
Yeah, is Merge VR. We love what they're doing and what they're bringing to the table. They're a really fun company. And they also allow for creation. They just released their object uploader, so now you can take your STLs and OBJs, even zipped with texture files, and upload in your Miniverse account, and then you can view those not only on the cube, you can anchor them in real life, and you can scale them. And then the next one would be CoSpaces. CoSpaces has been around for a while. Delightex made this product several years ago, but this is the first year anniversary of their education focus, and they've actually abandoned the other side of it, and now they're completely all into CoSpaces EDU, and that is their focus. And they got a pretty big team, but an overwhelming majority of the influence comes directly from educators. I mean, I would say they listen to them nonstop, and they're so in tune and aware of the educators' needs, and they're able to do the Apple model where they can project out things you don't even know you want. And one of those things was a Merge and CoSpaces merger. So now that you can create virtual reality in CoSpaces, and there's a merge tool built right in where you can just push AR mode and merge cube, and all of a sudden now you've got AR. And now we're going to have the ability, so students as young as in kindergarten have the ability to make VR and AR, which is extremely powerful.
Should we briefly talk? talk about. Go ahead, Alex.
Really quickly, I just want to say from the, I think Merge Cube is really an amazing piece of equipment because, pretty much QR codes were dead. And, I've seen, there was like a Tumblr account, like pictures of people using QR codes, and it's got like no post yet because QR codes were dead. When you put it on a cube and you make it tangible, it make some of, some of the earliest learners be able to touch something and feel it, put it in their hands. I think that's a game changer for Merge. We also saw, and I'll mention this, Google had some amazing announcements with turning on some augmented reality features in the Google Expeditions, and also Tour Creator, which is completely web VR based. So we're actually creating your own Google sort of expedition type tours. So again, all these creation tools were being talked about at ISTE, and I think it was really exciting to be there for my first ISTE, which I think is one of the largest EdTech conferences in the United States.
Yeah, yeah, and all of this sort of revolves around storytelling, right? And so, especially with CodeSpaces and Tour Creator, but CodeSpaces specifically, you're taking the ability to take 3D model, develop a space, a story, enhance it with animation through code, and then the hook there for the kids is you can then view it in VR, right? So they're going to create this space, present that to their fellow students in VR. It's a hook. It's something they love. Take it home. Hey, mom and dad, put your phone in this cardboard sleeve and take a look at my space. And interesting enough, I tell this story often, but we at our school, we've swapped PowerPoint in some cases for CodeSpaces. So instead of developing a PowerPoint as a platform to create a presentation, we have the kids do it all in CodeSpaces, and then they present their presentation, projected in 2D on a whiteboard, but then further the experience by allowing the kids to all jump in 3D or in VR, excuse me. So we're using it in all sorts of ways. What else did we see in hardware? What else did we see as far as hardware and the Go? And it's really hype, but I think it's important to talk about the Go and accessibility and its limits.
Yeah. Well, standalone is a big thing. We're going to start seeing more standalone, and even Engage. You can go, when you look on Engage's website, it talks about Go integration, and so obviously Oculus Go is the biggest standalone right now because of the price point. But we're seeing other ones as well. The Mirage Solo, which is technically $6 but we're going to see more. Like Vives is coming out, and Vive was they actually had it. Steven was actually helping demo that at the Unity booth at ISTE. And what was the reception like for that?
I thought the reception for the Vive Focus was good. I mean, it is expensive, but the good thing to know is, and I've been saying this for a while now because I think it was somebody else posted, I'm regurgitating this, but that it was going to be compatible with the Steam store. Lo and behold, a week ago, they showcased that. Great. So it has the ability to do that. In addition, I think it's unconfirmed, but this controller is going to have a 6 DoF update. So you imagine you have a 6 DoF headset, it's standalone, it's compatible with the Steam store, and everything else that Vive does, Vive Arts, that's accessible through them, and potentially 2 6 DoF controllers. I mean, imagine then if you have to stream Steam experiences because they require high-end computers, and it's not a one center streaming high-end experiences to untethered standalone units that are battery powered and battery controllers. Like, this is great. You couple that with, I talked about this too, a classroom management system that Vive Focus has inside of China. That's what we need. So the Oculus Go, great. It's $200. The problem is you need a Facebook account. A teacher can't manage it. So that's what we're lobbying Facebook Oculus for, is give us that device at that price point with good software and the ability for us to get kids maybe at 8 years old, and the ability for teachers to manage it through a tablet or a desktop, because right now they're just isolated experiences.
Yeah, and I would say that ties into the battle that we're facing in education with virtual reality right now, at least head-mounted display virtual reality, is age restrictions. And it's very confusing for educators right now because you have to take into account, well, what's the terms of service for the software, the hardware, or if it's just a headset that holds the phone. You may have different things you have to take into account. And so bearing that in mind, where we see is a big push in emergent technology in education, it's probably going to be AR, just because they don't have that as many restrictions. So, but our hope is that these companies, especially that are making relatively inexpensive standalone units are going to make some adjustments, and Avanta class VR is doing that. Now, I wouldn't say that their standalone unit is top quality, but they have everything that Stephen has been mentioning about classroom management. And when you're talking about age restrictions, they don't even they sort of address it. They say there's no research out to say that it's bad. We say use in moderation based off of Balancen's research that just came out. And they even have, like, in their lesson plans, like, it goes down to, like, kindergartners with these standalone headsets that they have pushed out. And it operates sort of on an Android platform, but I would say the quality is not very good. The screen's not what I would call high enough resolution for a good experience.
So we're seeing standalone as a huge trend, and that's going to continue to grow. And I've said this many times, that when you've got Amazon, Apple, Google, and Facebook all competing in the same space, you're going to see innovation happen very, very quickly, and you're going to see prices drop for consumers very, very quickly. So expect standalone VR to continue to push forward. But what we saw from ISTE, in addition to standalone VR, is a lot of these VR companies, traditional VR companies, coming out with augmented reality solutions. And I think that, if you were here for Charlie's session, we're going to continue to see mobile AR explode because we've got those devices already in our pocket. So continue to see more and more augmented reality types of applications, but also continue to see those drop in price and become more and more accessible. And I think it is an exciting time, and we're at an inflection point in education where we see big conferences with 24,000 people really embracing immersive tech. It's going to start to really change what's happening in the classroom. And we're really excited to bring that message forward with the virtual reality podcast and continue to tell the stories of educators, to interview CEOs, and bring you experiences from big conferences where we're talking about AR and VR together.
And if you're ever able to go to the conference where we're at, find us, because you can just walk up to the microphone. We want to talk to you.
Let's talk about the pop-up. The one last before maybe we get into Q&A. How we?
Yeah. Go ahead, Stephen.
For anybody that was at, did anybody see across from ISTE Central, there was this place where you had the keynote projected and you heard the audio from the keynote? Well, we took a high-top table, we turned down the audio, we popped up 4 mics, and we totally just took over that space. And for like an hour and a half, we're doing interviews, did some live stream to Facebook. We had Christian from HTC, Jeremy from Merge, Ed from Curoscope, Kevin from EQ. And then we had, so an hour and a half goes by, and we're doing our thing. And then we clean up, literally, tech guy in a black shirt walks up just like stomping, like he's pissed. And then he goes to us and he's giving us a side eye. And then he's like going back to the mic and he turns the audio up. And I'm just so thankful that we had cleaned up right before this guy came, because clearly we didn't ask for approval. We would have got more.
I got to be honest. Sure. I didn't know how because I turned down the audio mixer. I didn't I went back to turn it back up. Like, I saw that it was on again. I didn't even know that story. I didn't know that. I knew that we would get in trouble if we got caught, but I did not know that they actually had come over. It's the McCormick Center has some interesting rules and things like that, and so we took the approach of we'll ask for forgiveness, not permission, and I think it came out pretty good.
It did.
Yeah.
It was great.
I would say that's what the blogging cafe is for. That's what it's there for. It's there for people like us to jump in and use it for production. And I think that was a perfectly fine use. We also had a really cool opportunity, bringing, 200, 300 educators through VR for the first time in the VR playground. That was an awesome experience. Everybody always remembers their first time in virtual reality. It's so cool to bring these experiences to people, even to an entire group of kids from Guadalajara, Mexico, that were seeing virtual reality for the first time. It was so awesome. It was just a great experience in my first ISTE, but the best part for me was meeting my collaborators, James, Amanda, and Stephen, for the first time ever in person. So again, when you're listening to the podcast, keep that in mind. We've never met in person. And so I just thought that was really exciting. You guys want to talk about any other trends, or you want to open up for Q&A?
No.
Well, I want to kind of, if we could, I want to segue to the Q&A, because I want to talk about something that we talked about the other day in our group that y'all thought would be a little taboo, and that's about MR. Can I talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Y'all gonna get mad at me? Don't get mad at
No,
me.
not
You're
not
gonna
in
love me
public.
still? Good. Okay.
Yes.
So, so in all this craziness, and we actually did an episode on this, where we're talking about terminology that we see in immersion tech, and the big three that we're hearing about, AR, VR, and MR. It just gets really confusing because when you try to explain what MR is, technically, people don't quite understand what it is. But then you go out into the rest of the groupings, and there's like this understanding of what reality is supposed to be. And I blame Microsoft for that one, because when you think about MR, probably the first thing that would come to your mind is something to the effect of the HoloLens. But I'm going to make the prediction that MR as we know it, probably within the next year or two, is just going to be gone. There's too many interactive AR experiences that are actually much richer than any MR experience. If anybody has used the HoloLens before, or any technology that's similar to that, it's just not a very good experience. AR is so much better at the graphics and the way you interact, and it's much more fluid. It's easier to take your phone out and experience AR, like what we saw on the Google I/O, right? With the maps. Now you can hold your phone out in front of you, and it gives you the visual augmented representation of which direction you're supposed to go. Like, that's just much more fluid than, hold on, let me take my headset out of my bag and let me put it on. Now, not to say that we're going to see headsets in the future that are much more slimline and maybe the size of sunglasses, but MR, as we know, lens or something like that, it's going to go away. I think with that going away, the whole term of mixed reality is going to go away, and we're probably just going to end up seeing virtual reality, augmented reality, and those lines may get blurred even more. So I kind of want to open the floor with that on some thoughts that y'all may have, or some questions y'all have, or something like that along those lines, and we can go from there. If you don't have questions about that, we'll take it on anything.
And I'll just like to add, I mean, if you heard what Charlie said, I think around where VR and AR came from, VR as suspending disbelief and AR as a quest for tools, I don't see where mixed or merged reality really fits in there. So anyway, thoughts? Anybody have a question? Raise your.
Okay, guys. So if someone's got a question, just if you can see the names, I'll unmute you. So that's Caitlin.
Oh, yep.
There you go, Caitlin.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes?
Yep.
Okay. So just wanted to thank you for today, and also as Alex and I saw you at ISTE, and it was great. I just saw a crowd gathered around this table. The energy was just like right there, and I felt like, for me, it's really wonderful because some of us have been in this space for a while and kind of just waiting to see when the fire gets lit. It's kind of like if you build it. And I was at ISTE to talk about mindfulness in VR, and I guess part of this, we're in this phase where I think more people are focusing right now on hardware and user interfaces and terminology, and I think that's nice because it's sort of introducing the lexicon of how people can understand each other. It's a semantic sort of what do you mean when you're talking about VR, which is the beginning stage of a conversation about, I think, intentionality and storytelling and what's underneath. So I guess my question for the whole floor and maybe for the whole forum is, for me, working with social emotional learning and mindfulness and VR, could we, or do you know a creative space that already exists besides Twitter? There's AR, VR, and EDU, but something, maybe it's the podcast, where people feel like weekly there's a community forum where they can go to have these intentional discussions. I find teachers get caught up in the equipment, and sometimes get caught up in like how to use Merge or how to have these tools are great. I'm very interested in community building and kind of engaging with the questions underneath about how and why we create certain types of stories and how they align with certain curriculum standards, how teachers can feel less nervous about taking time out for VR because it actually is incorporated into the lessons. So, I have a book coming out called Mindful by Design that deals with these questions, but I'd love to participate in more communities. So that's a question for the podcast. Do you know regular space where people can come to interact about that?
Hi,
Wow.
Caitlin. I can take that.
Yeah.
And what I'll say is, I don't know of one specific space that's happening right now where you have a group of people coming together who are really talking about those issues of community building. But I do see a lot of new spaces emerging where those types of conversations could happen, because we're getting to a point now where a lot of people are being enabled with low-cost standalone VR, and also web interface virtual reality. There are a number of different potential venues for these types of conversations that could happen, but I think there's some key elements that would have to be in place. Number one, it would have to be a respectful environment that considers diverse populations and welcomes everybody to those conversations. I think having community moderation, where the participants in that group are able to flag or just highlight people that aren't behaving to what I think is another piece. There needs to be community ground rules, and we need to establish sort of rules for interaction that need to be very present and presented right up front, so that everybody knows what is accepted and not accepted in communities. And sort of, and if you don't by those rules, will happen to you, telling the community to moderate itself. In that way, I think you a very respectful.
You're breaking up pretty bad, Alex.
Oh,
I
sorry.
can hear though. I can hear.
Oh yeah, I can hear.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can
Oh,
still
good.
hear.
So,
It's
I
me.
mean,
Apologize.
I think there's a number of different platforms. There's Altspace, there's Roomy, there's Engage, there's there's a lot of different potential platforms that are meeting that sort of lowest common denominator access ability. And I think it's up to this community to build that. And I would be happy to meet with a smaller group of folks to help sort of come up with those ground rules and try to build something like that if that's what there's a lot of interest in creating. And personally, I'd be very interested in participating in that
I think
conversation
the
on a week.
two things that come in my mind are, just with the space so new, is that perhaps there needs to be a Slack channel or a Voxer group or something to that effect, where people that are like-minded can meet and chat. I mean, two people come to mind. You actually, in your panel earlier, the lady from the BBC, I immediately thought of
Yep.
Demetha. I don't know if you know Demetha Luther, but okay. And also Carrie Shaw from Embodied Labs. So she's got most famous for a VR app that will basically drive empathy and understanding for those with certain ailments, so macular degeneration, Alzheimer's, and things of that nature, and being mindful of why somebody with macular degeneration never looks at you straight on. And her story is powerful, and I think reconnecting you and others in that space together is probably the start, if you're not already on some of the other back channels that deal with that. But I'd love to talk further offline.
Interesting.
Well, and I
Thank
think it's really going to be grassroots too.
Yeah.
The small segments we see already in exploring AR and VR have just grown naturally. In AR, VR, and EDU itself, that was a grassroots thing. It was very small. I mean, it seemed like a year almost. It was only like 3 or 4 people, like every week, just getting together, and organically grew to that. And so I guess I don't want to say that we're immature in that, because I'm not talking as personality wise, but I think in pedagogically and psychologically mature to these implications that emergent technology, and we don't even know how to necessarily kind of coalesce or bring our thoughts together in a formal way. And so
Right.
I don't know. I think it would be really interesting to see what others want to see, and what is there. Do people want to see like a go-to? Do they want to have that social interaction once a week, or do they want to have a go-to central place to find something to interact in an asynchronous way? I don't know. I don't know what that would look like.
Caitlin, I just want to say, I think we have a whole new medium that's being created here, and we have a huge opportunity to rethink it and not to make the same mistakes that we have in the past with what's happened with the internet, with online forums, with comments on YouTube. I think we have a real opportunity to be authentic and to build something that will everyone. So really appreciate that question, and let's talk a little bit more after this. Again, sorry I didn't get to talk to you more at ISTE.
Oh, we made the most of our time, and I want to say that I think part of this involves willingness to get a little messy at the beginning, and I think all of us have that. Like when Seymour Papert created Mindstorms, he said there were the 4 P's: project, passion, peers, and play. And I think sometimes we get so serious about what should we create and how should we build, and it's so true. Creating, and I think the process of creation means that, just like Alex said, you keep human dignity and respect and these core values, and then you encourage that play together. So I'm totally ready to jump in the sandbox and play with you guys. Thank you.
Cool.
Nice,
Right.
nice.
Does anybody have any other questions?
I can't read the
I
name,
think
but
Jay has it. That's Jay, I think.
okay.
Jay, 1 second. Page 1, page 2. Can't see it, Jay. John.
John. Yeah, it looks like John.
John. Sorry. Right. John, you
Yep,
should have
it's
your mic.
John.
There
All
you
right,
go, John.
great. Hey, thank you. First of all, thank you for the invite to this. As someone who's been around, and I'm going to put virtual reality in quotes, for the last 14 years, beginning with Second Life and OpenSim and some of these platforms where there has been a big educator presence. Educators come into these platforms. They have had a lot of the same goals that I hear being talked about. And just a couple of observations and a couple of questions. Observations are, don't reinvent the wheel. Look at what has happened with these platforms in the past and try and incorporate that knowledge as much as you can, because the people who reinvent wheels tend not to go as quickly as they would like. Questions would be, I am not an educator. I am a consumer, a lifelong learner, a consumer of education. Have worked with a number of EDU clients over the years. My question to this group would be, how can I help? How can people who are tech-centric and commercially focused in terms of virtual spaces and augmented spaces, how can we best help educators? What are the opportunities for us to work together? And then the second question, or actually comment and question, is don't undersell mixed reality, especially in the EDU space, because imagine as an educator walking into a blank room, literally a blank room, and having that room painted for you with a particular experience that blends whatever physical components are in the room with augmented components. People really aren't going to be doing that with smartphones held up in front of their faces. We're going from looking down at things with smartphones to now looking up at things, but that thing is always in the way of the reality. So the glasses piece, I think, is going to be something, no offense to other opinions, but I think I'm personally waiting to where I can slip on a pair of Ray-Ban size augmented reality glasses and do all kinds of stuff. So question
actually,
before is,
that was my point. Yeah,
ahead.
I don't as we know it, like the lens that's clunky, or even like McCrary's headset that's quite heavy. Until it gets down to like what you said, the Ray-Bans, where it's something I can just slide out of my pocket, right? Those are the experiences. But to address your first question, I think it's extremely valuable that not just in the world of education that we include educators, but if we want to talk about education and learning, period, we include all stakeholders. And you being a person that comes from a tech background, a person that is a consumer, a person that is maybe even developed a little bit, like your opinion on is very valuable to educators, because educators probably look through the lens of pedagogically or pedagogy first, right? They don't think about things like design, user experience, those type things until they're in the midst of it. And then usually what happens is when they find that it's not a good experience or design, they get a bad taste for it, right? And because they're not thinking of it through that lens first. So as a lifelong learner yourself, or as somebody that's fond of this thing we call immersion technology, the input that you can help give to educators is invaluable. It's something that we probably need to talk about what Caitlin said about this community. Well, okay, it does have educators and maybe there's education focus, but that doesn't mean it's just educators. That we all have a vested interest in educating our young, right? Regardless if we're teachers or if we're just people in the community, there's a bigger social responsibility that we have to make sure that the next generation does better than previous one.
And then last but not least, there was a question: how do we communicate when we are not in virtual spaces? I would encourage anybody that has not taken a look at Discord. Discord is an awesome open platform that allows anybody to create a group that is private if they want, or open, and it offers audio, video, and text, obviously, and is also compatible with a lot of the VR platforms that are out there. So take a look at Discord.
Okay,
Thank you.
That's good. Discord.
Awesome.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Any questions? I know there's a couple other hands that were up earlier.
Right here on the end, I can't make out the
Read it.
name.
It's Michelle, don't worry. Okay.
Yeah.
There we go.
Can you hear me? No?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, we hear
Yeah,
you.
Okay, so yeah, I wanted to kind of extend John's question. Because I'm a vendor, we make educational labs, and we showcased one of them. It's merged booth at EST.
Cool.
And wanted to ask how should we talk to educators? What should we provide for educators, for them to best understand the AR technology? Because we know it's always something new for them, and we as specialists in the technology, how should we talk to them, and what should we provide to them for them to best use this as a technology in the classroom?
Ali, I think you should finish this one, but I just want to say ambassador program, and giving the
That's where I
power
was
to
gonna
the
go with that.
educators to really, to speak your tools, to offer your tools to a certain number of people, to showcase them for you in your booths and at conferences. But James, I would take it away because you're an ambassador for like 10 companies.
Yeah, well, Stephen hit the nail on the head, because what we're talking about is we don't have this like this translator, right, between developers and educators, and there's very few of those people that can bridge that gap. But what you do is you can find those people through social media. They're out there and they can help bridge that gap. They may be classroom educators that got into technology. They may be technology people that got into education, but they can help bridge the gap on, okay, what is it that the student actually needs or the teacher needs to help that student, right? Because it's probably too much pressure on developers to say, okay, I know everything that a student or a teacher is going to need. And it's probably not very healthy to do that. Even in our realm, we try to reach out and we try to find out, even though we're tech savvy, we try to reach out. We try to find things out for ourselves, like the podcast. Okay, how can we best market ourselves and things like that? Well, we can do that ourselves, but we try to reach out and get that advice from others that are more specialized in that field or can help bridge that gap between us and the consumer. So I think that from you being on the developer side of it, and then trying to get to educators with, okay, what do educators want to see, and then how are they trying to implement that? Because sometimes it can be a very difficult conversation because the language that you two speak may be completely different. So ambassador programs are really good, and you can you can do one for like no cost. Like it doesn't cost anything. You're going to find passionate people that want to take part in that ambassador program that can be invaluable to you year in and year out to bridge that gap. So Stephen nailed it.
No.
Ambassador programs.
And I go back to, and I can't remember who said this, but
that's one. That's one of the things that that's why we went to ISTE, and Milena was also at your podcast. She told me that she's found some great educators that's understood the value, and we're like able to grasp it, and also explain the educational value out of it. So yeah.
And if you find those people,
that's great to.
If you find those people, have those people see if they want to come on and do like just a webinar or something like that, or a short YouTube video that showcases that tool either in action or some applications that can be done in the classroom. And that's all you really need. That was the story of CoSpaces. CoSpaces was not an education. They had no education focus, and they had no idea until, a group of 5 or 6 of us, we hijacked their tool and we made it for education, and we were very passionate about it, and just kind of grew from there. So that's your tie-in. Especially if y'all found people at ISTE, even if it's only 1 or 2 people, that is enough to get you going and to find out exactly what educators and students need.
Yeah, agreed.
Any other other questions? I'm intimidated by this alligator who keeps snapping at me right up.
I hope you guys have been appreciating the live effect show that we've been putting on for you. You can tell that we've been in VR for 6 hours straight now because everything's gone a little crazy. Guys, I'm going to say, I'm going to glide over here and tell myself a roundabout. I'm going to say a huge thank you to the VR podcast team. Let's unmute everybody so we can give them some love.
Yeah. Awesome, guys.
Thank you.
And thank you to Steve.
I'm going to mute absolutely everybody, apart from the guys that are here with me from Immersive. That's Mike and Chris. I just want to say a huge thank you to these 3 guys, because I come to them with these crazy ideas like, let's do 6 hours straight, and rather than tell me to get lost, like, yeah, let's totally do that. That'd be amazing. So fair play. These guys there, again, similar to what you guys on the panel were saying, I've never met them in real life, and I was just DMing on Twitter just now, and I said it's such a shame actually that we're not in the same space. We could go out and celebrate now, but instead wrap up with a bit of a game. Okay, so it's going to be last man or woman standing. The way this is going to work is I'm going to clear the space of every single asset. I'm going to give absolutely everybody IFX privileges, and as soon as your bandwidth packs up and your engage can't handle it anymore, then you're out. And it's the last person left in. Take a photo with your tablet. See how we go.
This is never going to end.
Yeah. This is good. Well, it's a good way of stress testing the app, isn't it? Let's see how many hundreds of IFX we can bring in. I'm also going to
seen how this
destroy all IFX. There we go. You guys, you still get your logo up on the built-in screen up the top there on the mountain. I'm going to unmute everybody as well, so it'll be even more carnage. Although if you're on a oh no, head starts. Who's brought the Titanic in? Destroy. No, that's cheating. I'm going to unmute everybody. If you're on a not on a VR headset and you've got a feedback loop in your audio, I will have to mute you again though. Right, destroy that. Stop cheating. Manage. Unmute everybody. Enable IFX everybody. Right. Last one left.
I'm going to share.
On the tablet, bring in anything like. Please don't bring in sounds.
Yes.
I'm gonna mute everybody for 1 second. Please don't in sounds, because the sounds, it just becomes a dirge and we can't hear anybody. So we shall call that a false start. I'm gonna destroy and unmute, and we shall start again. There we go.
There it is.
Here's my IKEA shelf. Here's my IKEA cabinet. James, where are you?
I'm right behind you. Are you putting your IKEA cabinet?
Oh my God! Whoa!
Steven is making himself a home right here. Where'd he go, Steven?
I want to live in here. I'm still. My pipe is bigger than yours, James. I'm still here. Oh, I'm losing it.
Oh, I'm getting so close. Good grief.
Oh my goodness. Whoa.
Warzone.
I wanted to thank people.
We can hear you, Caitlin. You can thank us.
Good. I wanted to come up to
Love the gargoyle demon.
Yeah,
Hell on earth, guys. Hell on earth.
Caitlin will load one other space after
We're going to
this.
jump into the light in New York City, so I also want to thank them. And all of the space and the youth and the games, and it's really wonderful. And, oh, wow. Hi, Paola. Oh, and there's Clement. Hello. Nice to meet you. You can see me.
I'm gonna have all of these pictures to sort through in my folder.
Yeah, I'm literally walking through people.
There's only one way to do this, I think. To
Is
see
this what
this.
the end of the world's going to look like?
Whoa.
Terminate with extreme prejudice.
Side of fire.
Final boss looks.
So I can,
Boss fight looks like.
oh,
Like, who needs 4th of July fireworks when we have this?
Still 21 people in the room.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
I'm stood in the middle of
bigger. Make
fire.
bigger.
I'm going high to get the.
Oh, Engage is struggling. Engage is struggling.
No, it's still fine.
Let's get the picture.
I'm getting a picture from up high.
Yeah, I'm coming up there with you. Oh, it's clear. It's, it's easy. It's easy up on the hill.
So good to meet you.
Hi. Good to meet you.
Anyone getting nauseous already?
This is what
Great.
this is
fine
the
if-
value of a 1080i and 64 gigs of RAM.
Sorry. I'm literally watching a system. I'm overwhelmed by assets.
If you come up the hill, you're fine. I've come over to the other side of the mountain. It's lovely over here.
Hey,
There's
Brian.
no effects at all.
Hey, Brian. I think we
fire.
found the nexus of calm right here.
Wow.
with you, man.
Slowly flying.
Pick your bat, man. A selfie.
Don't go the
Take
easy
yourself,
way.
dude. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, if we
Secret
can't
Bell in
break
the
it,
middle of all of it.
love this platform.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
All right. Yep. Flip that camera.
mine's not taking pictures anymore.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
time
I
for some
figured it
audio.
out.
No audio. Bad audio.
Still going. I'm also on fire.
Come on.
I'm also burning up.
I am.
All right,
I'm
come on,
losing it.
take
I'm getting
pictures.
pretty sick.
Okay. Guys, I've muted everyone. I'm tapping out. This is crazy. I'm going to load one last space. If anyone wants to jump in and just say hello, good night, anything, I'll be in one other room. It'll just be called Steve. You're all welcome.